A lot of people are suggesting in the crypto world that XRP is actually a better form of liquidity than the US dollar itself. And that is a pretty crazy and radical suggestion to make. But if we actually dive into the logic of it, it kind of actually makes a little bit of sense. So let's break apart some examples of why XRP might actually be a better form of liquidity than the dollar. We don't want to just assume things. We need to have sound logic to back up our thesis for anything that we believe. But I do believe that there are things to be said here. The first example I want to look at is something like the petrodollar. And if you don't already know, the petrodollar is an agreement that the United States has with Saudi Arabia, that Saudi Arabia will sell their oil in USD or dollars. So if anybody around the world wants to go buy oil from Saudi Arabia, they first have to acquire dollars. Well, this would force countries around the world to go to the United States to get dollars to be able to purchase oil. But you have to realize doing so was kind of cumbersome, right? Because now if I go to the US, I need to get a bunch of dollars. Well, I might need more than I actually need right now for oil, because what about in the future? I don't want to be constantly running back to the US. And having dollars doesn't really do much for other countries in their own country or other places around the world. The only countries that actually accepted the dollar were countries where it was just epically failing, right? The fiat of their own nation, like Argentina, for example, Nigeria at times, they've turned to the dollar because their own fiat died. But otherwise, every country has their own fiat that they use, and it's not very practical to hold dollars. Now, intro XRP. XRP is easily commutable between nations, and transactions can happen in 3 to 5 seconds. They're very, very fast. And not only that, 1,500 transactions can happen every second. So it's very easily commutable from one currency to another. You don't have to worry about being trapped in another nation's currency, even if that is the dollar itself. Not only that, but if you don't already know, the DXY, or the value of the dollar, is the largest bear market that has ever existed. Because just like all other fiats, it is inflationary. So it will lose value as time goes on, and the government inevitably will always devalue it to help deal with their national debt. While at the same time, XRP is disinflationary because it has a fixed supply. At 100 billion tokens, it will no longer have any more or any less. It is a fixed supply, and it cannot be made greater or smaller. So in other words, XRP has the ability to hold its value better than the dollar does in the long run. And we can actually